temperatures well above freezing. 8, 9, 10 degrees the low across the southeast. But cold air isn't far away from the northeast of Scotland, getting colder across Shetland and the mainland. And with the wet weather here, we're going to start to see more snow falling, initially over hills on Tuesday, but coming down to low levels by the end of the day across the far northeast. So that could cause some disruption, quite a bit of snow by the time we get to Wednesday. Wet weather working into Northern Ireland. It'll be rain here, as it will be through the central belt of Scotland. Much of England and Wales, dry and fine tomorrow. We'll see some sunny spells across the south, which could see highs of 16 Celsius. So quite a contrast between north and south during Tuesday, and that will continue as the snow, if anything, gets heavier on Tuesday night across northern Scotland. So there's something, as I say, we need to watch, could cause some disruption. We're going to see showery rain crossing the country during Wednesday. It turns brighter and drier to the end of the week, but colder for all of us.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
And welcome to another week of On the Money. I'm back, and here we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I am Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about the upcoming rise in the price of milk, because industry sources are warning us to expect a 50% rise in the price of the white stuff. Plus, we're talking about cancelled Easter flights and asking how you can tackle your money worries. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the Prime Minister says the UK will continue to work with its NATO allies to ensure Putin fails in Ukraine, as Boris Johnson seeks tougher international sanctions against Russia. Ukraine's Prosecutor General says Russian forces have committed crimes against humanity in the country, adding that events in Irpin, Bucha and other places will be investigated. Satellite images show a mass grave in the grounds of a church in Bucha. The Kremlin categorically denies any accusations related to the murder of civilians there. Well, Ukrainian Member of Parliament Alexei Gonchakaro told GB News he's personally seen evidence of war crimes.
What we saw in liberated areas of Kyiv region is absolutely awful. I've been there personally 2 days, and I saw a number of bodies of killed people just lying on the streets, just in their cars. People were shooted, people were burned down, and that's so awful. I can't even explain you when you see pictures like this.
The UK Foreign Secretary has announced £10 million of support for organisations working with survivors of sexual violence in Ukraine. Liz Truss is travelling to Poland to meet with her Ukrainian and Polish counterparts and aid organisations supporting Ukrainian refugees. Well, the UK's Defence Ministry says Russian forces, including mercenaries, are refocusing their offensive into the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. Odessa City Council member Peter Ogpov says his country still needs help from the UK.
I think that everybody in this world, except Mr. Putin, is interested to stop this war because your country also paying the price. Your prices, for example, for oil or for products in grocery stores are rising. If you will help us more, this war will be stopped sooner and everybody will benefit from that.
The International Trade Secretary has said the UK must build its green economy to eliminate Russian fuel from our energy mix once and for all. Anne-Marie Trevelyan says it must work with reliable energy partners to protect our supply chains and steady the global market. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused turmoil in global energy markets. Andy Mayer, Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, told GB News that rationing energy is a bad idea.
This idea in particular, rationing, it comes fundamentally from the International Energy Agency, who put out a 10-point plan a couple of weeks ago, saying, wouldn't it be brilliant if every country in the world started cutting down on energy use, for example, controlling the way they use their cars and doing more to stay at home rather than go to work. And no, they can't control people's lives at this micro level. This is not a good idea fundamentally.
In some other news now, and the government's former ethics chief has reportedly been fined over the Partygate scandal. The Daily Telegraph says that Helen McNamara, who used to be a deputy cabinet secretary, received a £50 fine in connection with a leaving do held in the cabinet office in June 2 years ago. Well, 20 fixed penalty notices have been issued as part of the police investigation into COVID rule-breaching parties in Westminster. The Prime Minister's spokesperson says Boris Johnson has not been fined. Wales Secretary Simon Hart told GB News there are many things people would have done differently with hindsight.
When we look back at any week in our lives, and particularly those frenetic weeks in the early part of the pandemic, there are many things and many decisions and judgments that we probably all made at the time that, some of which are invisible, some of which, like this, are very high profile and command great public interest. There are many decisions we wish we'd taken differently.
Now, for those heading overseas on the first day of the school Easter holidays, flights have been cancelled. Cross-channel services have been hit by major delays. Eurotunnel is warning its rail services to Calais are delayed by 3 hours. British Airways cancelled at least 115 flights scheduled for today. And EasyJet preemptively cancelled 62 flights that were supposed to depart today. EasyJet blamed sickness and staff shortages because of COVID. Well, shortness of breath, having an aching body and loss of appetite are 3 of 9 symptoms that have newly been added now to the official list of COVID-19 signs of illness. The changes were added to the NHS website and emerged just days after free universal testing for the infection ended in England. Well, infection levels have hit a record high in the UK, with almost 5 million people estimated to currently have the infection. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for today's On the Money.
And this is On the Money, and for the next hour we're talking about the price of milk. War in Ukraine and related sanctions are pushing up the prices of fuel, fertiliser and animal feed, all of which is causing the production costs of milk to spiral. Industry insiders are warning of a 50% increase in the price in the shops. But is that fair? Or are big retailers set to engage in some profiteering? We asked dairy farmers and farming unions. And as COVID causes no shows at work, airlines are cancelling some Easter flights. Where else could staff shortages cause inconvenience and economic upheaval? And as more and more British workers feel financial anxieties as the cost of living squeeze gets tighter, we meet the founder of WageStream, an app designed to help cash-strapped households manage their finance. That's today's In-Depth Money Talks later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews or tweet me personally @Liam Halligan. But stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Everything's going in the wrong direction at the wrong time, and the direction of travel is bad. These are the words of Andrew Cook, the General Director of the Provision Trade Federation. That's an industry lobby group for dairy producers across Britain. What he's talking about is the upward direction, the spiralling increase of farmers' costs, whether it's fuel, fertiliser or feedstock for animals. These increases in turn are pushing up the price in the shops, not just of bread, meat and vegetables, but also the price of milk. Russia and Ukraine are major producers of wheat and other crops, millions of tonnes of which are usually shipped out via the Black Sea, which is now mired in conflict. Many leading sea freight lines are anyway refusing to handle goods originating from Russia. That's caused global food prices to soar, shifting attention to UK production. But with fuel and fertiliser prices also spiking, homegrown food is getting more expensive too. Fertilisers made from gas and a mineral called potash, produced in vast quantities by Russia and its ally Belarus, now also under export embargo. This time last year, fertiliser was around £250 per tonne, but now it's up to £800 as farmers panic buy and both gas and potash prices surge. Rising feedstock prices are also pushing up the cost of producing milk, with the price of a 4-pint supermarket carton set to rise from £1.15 now to between £1.60 and £1.70, according to industry insiders, an increase of up to 50%. Now, powerful milk purchasers like Tesco are talking about a 20% rise in the price they pay dairy farmers to reflect the rising production cost. But we're being told to expect a 50% price rise in the shops. Now, I could be wrong, but that sounds a bit weird, as if retailers' margins on milk are about to get much wider. And that's our On the Money question today. A 50% rise in milk prices, production costs, or profiteering? Here at On the Money, we do grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff, and that's why we have Paul Tompkins joining us. He's Vice Chair of the Dairy Board for the National Farmers Union, a key guest today. And, of course, always key in the studio, Miss Blonde Money herself, Helen Thomas. Great to see you. Helen, thanks for joining us. So let's go to the National Farmers Union. Paul, what do you think when you hear that milk prices are about to go up 50% in the shops, but the big supermarkets are offering dairy farmers just a 20% increase in the price of the milk that they sell?
Well, you know, margins are tight throughout the entire supply chain. I know that I'm being heaped with extra costs as a result of a whole multitude of factors, and those are what I'm really concerned about. There is undoubtedly a need for conversation about fairness in the supply chain and how the money moves from right from the shop shelf down to my farm gate.
We know, though, don't we, that for years dairy farmers, there have been suicides among dairy farmers because they can't make ends meet. Of course, that's not the cost of the big wholesale buyers of milk, but there has often been stories and concerns about farmers not getting a fair price for their milk. Clearly, production costs are going up. Clearly, if you read Farmers Weekly and other farming trade press, the big supermarkets are now offering bigger price increases to dairy farmers. But why is it that the price increases that dairy farmers are being offered are so much lower as a percentage than what we're being told to expect when we buy milk in supermarkets or our corner shop?
You're absolutely right. The price that farmers have paid for milk has been at the forefront of mind for many years, not just in the last few months. And we all know that supermarkets use milk as a loss leader. What I mean by that is milk is a brilliant product, and dairy products are found in 98% of fridges across the country. That means that we go to supermarkets to buy them. So they are what drives footfall into the supermarket, and the supermarket therefore wants to sell it as cheap as possible in order that they can make some more money on something else that they can plug to you at the same time. So this is a cat and mouse game that has been going on for years, but it's currently exasperated. And it's exasperated because there is little recognition from the rest of the supply chain that the costs just keep coming back to the farm gate. As you mentioned earlier, we're all under extra cost pressures, no more than supermarkets and processors and dairy farmers. The difference is when a supermarket has more costs, they can just pass those down to the next layer in the supply chain. When that middleman has more costs, he can then pass them down. Until they get to the farm gate, we can't pass them anywhere. I have no way of setting a milk price or what I sell my milk for. It's what we get is what we're given. And we're on this treadmill at the moment, which is just moving us towards a time where the cost of producing that milk is accelerating, and there doesn't seem to be enough recognition from the rest of the supply chain. And I think that's because, if I'm honest, they're short-sighted. They think that this is a blip that we will get over. We can just ride on the fat of farmers for the short term and hope that things resolve to normal. But I would remind others in the supply chain that dairy farmers will work on long production cycles. So it takes me 2.5 years to get a calf from being born on our farm to be actually producing milk. And that incurs a lot of costs over those 2 years. So even if things were to return to normal, even if we were to reduce our costs now and be paid a fair price for our milk, the implications of what we're going through now is actually going to be for the medium to longer term. So I think it's a concern for all of those that are interested in eating some decent dairy food.
Very interesting. I'm not picking on Tesco in particular, though we have gone to Tesco for a right to reply, of course, and if they come back to us, we'll bring that to you. Well, joining us now is Steve Evans, who's a dairy farmer down in West Wales. Steve, welcome back to On the Money. You are always welcome on the show. Can you explain to me why the big supermarkets, some of them are talking about a 20% increase in the price that they offer farmers for milk, but you've got industry insiders, key people warning us of a 50% rise in the price of milk?
Supermarkets have all of a sudden become very, very conscious and a little bit scared of what's going on in the marketplace. You've got situations where yields or production is down on farms 2 to 3%. Currently, you've got a number of factors within the supply chain, i.e. the fertilizer, the feed, the fuel. You've got a number of people making noises about leaving the industry altogether. Some of that is generational sort of change where you've got someone in the 50s, 60s saying, right, enough's enough. I don't want to incur debt. And they will throw the towel in. And you do not blame them whatsoever. I'm fortunate. I've got a 20-year-old son coming through as well that's keen. But what is actually happening, like was alluded to earlier, in the whole cycle that goes on, it's a 2-year process. We're all in charge of our own sort of on-farm governance and how we structure our business. But the supermarkets are getting a little bit twitchy, a little bit scared about what's going on because all of a sudden, supply's tight. Our milk goes into cheese. The cheese stores are bare. There is hardly any hard cheese in storage. We're coming into the season now where cows are going out, spring flush as we call it, as cows are going to hit grass. That's not quite materialising as it normally would. I had a little drive around the county last Friday, Pembrokeshire, where I am. Very, very strong dairy area. The countryside's looking yellow. People are sort of moving away, reducing the amount of fertilizer they're putting on. We're facing this winter coming, where feed costs are going to be through the roof. What are people going to do? They're going to feed less. So there's going to be less milk about to go into your doorstep deliveries or your supermarket deliveries that'll go into the cheese factories or into the value-added markets, things like that. There is a massive change coming this year. And when I've been on previously and Gareth Wyn-Jones has been on previously, you know, we've tried our best to sort of forewarn, you know, what's happening, what's coming. But we can only do so much, and we're not scaremongering. We're just saying how it is, what's happening. So, yeah, if I was a retailer, I'd be pretty generous towards a farmer at the moment to try and, you know, hand on the shoulder and say, look, you know, we're going to help you through this, because you are going to see people leave the industry.
This is pretty astonishing, isn't it? We're talking about the price of milk, the price of bread. You and I talked about inflation since the first edition of On the Money. You appeared on it back in early September, and it was inflation, inflation, inflation. People told us we were crazy. And yet now we've got a situation where, as Steve Evans just said, food markets were already tight across the world. Farmers' costs were already going up throughout the autumn. And yet this Russia-Ukraine crisis has made the situation much, much tighter.
Yeah, it has. And I mean, this is economics in action. I mean, it's real people's lives in action, I should say that as well. Of course, you and I know as economists, the way that this might pan out then is if the price goes too high, people try and switch to something else. It'd be very interesting, actually, to know if people can. I mean, that was a really great statistic there. 98% of households have milk in their fridge. Or I think maybe it was dairy products in their fridge. But, you know, that's... I mean, that's everybody, basically, right? So can there be a substitution effect? We would call it the price elasticity of demand.
Yep.
How does it move around? How essential are those dairy products to the way we live? But then you've also got, so there's the demand side, then there's the supply side. And what's you know, should be potentially frightening that we're hearing there is people dropping out of the industry altogether.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen then?
Which again is a long-term trend.
Yeah.
I know that from farmers where I live in the east of England. You know, my kids' friends, they're often the sons and daughters of farmers, and it's hard to get the next generation to come into farming, but this could be something that leads to a systemic drop-off.
Yeah.
If farmers' margins are so tight, squeezed, that farms become non-viable as their costs soar. And yet, Steve Evans was just saying supermarkets need to put their hands on the shoulders of their suppliers. And yet I ask again, we're talking about a 50% increase in milk prices in the shop, but just a 20% increase from the supermarkets that I've seen in the price that they're going to give farmers for their milk.
Well, I hope...
Seems the opposite of putting your hand on the farmer's shoulders.
Well, it sounds like it, but I mean, I have to hope the economics wins out, which is if they don't pass it on, then they're going to crucify their own supply and crash demand, which basically destroys the market.
That's right.
So you'd have to hope somewhere in the supermarkets there is... it might sound boring, the economics, but, you know, it does play its part. And I'd hope that they have got a long-term opinion and view on this. You know, they surely must understand what we've just heard there, 2.5 years lead time to be able to manage when the dairy's coming online.
Well, look, this is a really crucial discussion. That's why we've decided to extend this across the break. So my guests will stay with me on this. Helen Thomas in the studio. We've got Steve Evans, Pembrokeshire dairy farmer, of course, and we've got Paul Tompkins of the National Farmers Union. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Stay with us. We'll be back with you with some emails. Keep them coming in. You're on the money.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather from the Met Office. A different feel out there today. It's not as cold as it was, but it is quite a grey day with many of us seeing outbreaks of rain. Here's the reason why. Low pressure up to the northeast with these two weather fronts. In between them, some mild air, but still a lot of isobars across the chart. So it is still a fairly breezy day, and there's an awful lot of cloud around as well, bringing rain at times. Certainly a wet day for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland. The rain a bit patchy elsewhere, and we do have some breaks in the cloud, a bit of sunshine over southeast Scotland, northeast England, and brightening up at times across parts of southern England and South Wales. And if we see a hint of sunshine, temperatures could easily pop up to 14, 15 degrees. So it is quite a bit warmer than it was for much of last week. During this evening, that rain will continue for Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland. Again, patchy rain elsewhere, particularly over hills. But again, largely dry across eastern England. Not much rain across the south either. All the cloud keeping the temperatures up. It is going to be a mild night with temperatures well above freezing. 8, 9, 10 degrees the low across the southeast. But cold air isn't far away from the northeast of Scotland, getting colder across Shetland and the mainland. And with the wet weather here, we're going to start to see more snow falling, initially over hills on Tuesday, but coming down to low levels by the end of the day across the far northeast. So that could cause some disruption, quite a bit of snow by the time we get to Wednesday. Wet weather working into Northern Ireland. It'll be rain here, as it will be through the central belt of Scotland. Much of England and Wales, dry and fine tomorrow, and we'll see some sunny spells across the south, which could see highs of 16 Celsius. So quite a contrast between north and south during Tuesday, and that will continue as the snow, if anything, gets heavier on Tuesday night across northern Scotland. So there's something, as I say, we need to watch, could cause some disruption. We're going to see showery rain crossing the country during Wednesday. It turns brighter and drier to the end of the week, but colder for all of us.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back, you're on the money, and we're talking about the price of milk. Industry sources are telling us to expect a 50% rise in the price of the white stuff. But supermarkets, those that have said, are offering dairy farmers just 20% more for their milk to reflect rising costs of fuel, fertiliser, feedstock for animals. I'm still with my expert panel. Paul Tompkins, let's go back to you. You are Vice Chair of the Dairy Board for the National Farmers Union. Obviously, we're talking about the here and now, but as both you and Steve Evans, that our dairy farmer in Pembrokeshire, were outlining before the break, this is a long-term trend. Our dairy industry has been struggling in parts for a long time. What do you want to happen? What should now happen?
We need a food strategy. Not so long ago, Henry Dimbleby launched a report that was a white paper for the government to launch a food strategy for this country. Are we not a little bit self-interested if we are watching the gas prices across Europe increase because we are reliant on unsavoury characters to produce our energy? And we're all watching the Germans and thinking, why are you reliant on Russia for your gas? Well, then I need to ask the same question to our government. Why are you reliant on people overseas to feed us? And that is the strategy that has been since the end of the Second World War. And that strategy needs to change, because I believe that food security is one of the fundamental reasons that we have a government. And if they're not getting that right, then we need to be asking them those questions. So the one thing we need to do now is have a strategy. How are we going to encourage the right level of food production of delicious, nutritious food that's produced in harmony with the environment and nature around us to ensure that everyone in this country can afford good, decent quality food?
But Paul, I have to ask you, for years, when we were in the European Union, the Common Agricultural Policy, which the farmers' unions supported tooth and nail, paid farmers not to produce food. And we're ending those farm payments now because we've left the EU, but we're still going to be paying farmers, again, not to produce. We're going to be paying farmers to do, environmental things, husbandry of their stewardship of their land and so on. Is this about government money, about government subsidy for farming, or is it about something else?
It's not necessarily about cash injections. Sure, those things are welcome, and in order to provide some stability to during risky periods, absolutely they become necessary. But there's a whole other raft of measures that the government can take to help us have a positive food environment in this country to farm within. So, for example, reducing red tape, the burden of air and water quality, the introduction of permitting for dairy farming needs to be wholly reconsidered. These are just additional costs that are coming to our farms for no reason. So it's not about handouts. It's not about giving us money to produce food. It's about making sure that we have the right environment around us, the right financial environment around us to thrive and deliver quality food.
Steve Evans in Pembrokeshire there, do you agree with what Paul Tompkins just said? Steve?
Has been a problem in all of this. Look, we're acutely aware, okay, that agriculture, was got to clean up its act, but it seems to be we're very much targeted all the way through, and yet the fossil fuel companies are getting away with it. At the end of the day, food is such a critical point within sort of policy, governmental policy, but people need food. Yes, they need fuel, they need heating, but they need food. It's trying to sort of establish what we can do to ensure food security. I'm here in Wales. We have a devolved government here, which is hell-bent on just planting everything with trees, and it's like, where on earth is the food going to come from? We grow grass for fun. We have plentiful rainfall here. We can grow livestock, rear livestock, grow food relatively cheaply. But unfortunately, we are at a tipping point now where the income we are getting, and yes, we've had a little rise in the milk price, but that's been gobbled up by input cost. So there's just not a move in pricing coming through quick enough. And hence my comment earlier on about people leaving the industry. The whole supply chain needs protecting, and it starts within the farm gate, because
Steve,
without
let me
the
ask
people
you
in
this.
the farm gate,
Within the farming community, as you know it, and obviously you're just one part of the country, but I know farmers are a huge network. You talk to each other a lot. Do you think solar panels are an issue? Some people would say, oh, why are we putting solar panels across so many of our fields when we should be growing food? Is there enough room to have both more solar panels to help tackle our energy security and grow more food to help tackle our food security?
We, on our farm, have 2.5 to 3 acres of roof space, okay? Which is where animals are housed, feed is stored over the winter, things like that.
Big building.
There should be more encouragement for that roof space to be covered with panels rather than taking grade 1, 2 and 3 land out of production to cover in panels. But it doesn't just stop at farms. There's just down the road, we've got a massive industrial site. Why on earth aren't those buildings used for renewable energy? It just seems absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. We've got land values down here now that have hit £20,000 an acre last week. And it was a farmer that ended up buying it. Why? Because he's trying to secure more land to grow more feed on to reduce his exposure to the market. Yet, if he's borrowed the money to do it, which I assume he has, his interest cost alone on that is going to be £600 an acre, more probably. You know, it's and he was up against I'll use the term, a greenwashing company. Yeah. So, there's something fundamentally wrong here.
There's a big dilemma there. Helen Thomas, let's just go to you for a final thought. I mean, are we going to be talking a lot more about food security? Certainly our two farming expert guests think we should be.
Absolutely, we are. Food security and energy security, which, as we're hearing, are in fact intertwined. And I think in a way, we've had it relatively easy, not having to be so concerned about interacting with unsavoury characters, as we've just heard. But, it is absolutely crucial for any government. And, of course, the invasion of Ukraine brings that into sharp relief. But I think, I hope that what we will get now is some kind of long-term plan about it, because the two do interact. And it has to be a long-term decision about, where are we going to put these things? I mean, that sounds like a great idea, to put the solar panels on the roofs of, not just farms, industrial buildings. Goodness knows there might be lots more space that we could put it on.
And, of course, food prices couldn't really be more politically explosive, could they? Given that poorer households spend such a high proportion of their money on what is obviously the ultimate human necessity.
Absolutely, but let's not forget part of the reason, as ever, that a lot of this stuff did go overseas was it was cheaper. So it's that relentless drive lower in cost. I mean, I know we need more security, but the security itself may come at a price. But maybe it is absolutely a price worth paying to ensure, that security of delivery.
Really good to talk to you, Helen Thomas. Tough subject. Great to have Paul Tompkins with us of the National Farmers Union and, of course, Steve Evans there in Pembrokeshire. We will reconvene. We will discuss this again. I can't really think of a more important subject at the moment in British politics than food/energy security. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:33. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview with Peter Briffett. He's the man behind an app aiming to help workers and cash-strapped households struggling with their finances. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Prime Minister says Britain will never waver from supporting our friends in Ukraine as he seeks tougher international sanctions against Vladimir Putin's Russia. Ukraine's Prosecutor General says Russian forces have committed crimes against humanity in the country, adding that events in Irpin, Bucha and other places will be investigated. The UK Foreign Secretary has announced £10 million of support for organisations working with survivors of sexual violence in Ukraine. She's in Poland to meet with her Ukrainian and Polish counterparts in Warsaw. Liz Truss is also going to meet with aid organisations supporting Ukrainian refugees. The government's former ethics chief has reportedly been fined over the Partygate scandal. The Daily Telegraph says that Helen McNamara was fined £50 in connection with a leaving do held in the Cabinet Office in June 2 years ago. The Prime Minister's spokesperson says Boris Johnson has not been fined. Shortness of breath, having an aching body and loss of appetite are 3 of 9 symptoms that have now newly been added to the official list of COVID-19 signs of illness. Infection levels have hit a record high in the UK, with almost 5 million people estimated to currently have the infection. EastEnders star June Brown, best known as her role as Dot Cotton, has died at the age of 95. A statement from her family confirmed she passed away at her home in Surrey on Sunday evening with her family by her side. An EastEnders spokesperson said she was loved and adored and will never be forgotten. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and radio. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
And welcome back. This is On the Money. It's 1:38. Now, did you know that the average price of a basic funeral is around £4,000? And this figure's actually down on last year, but it's still a very hefty sum. And now the funeral planning industry is set for a shake-up. From July, the government regulator will set new rules, banning cold calling of potential customers and altering checks on funeral companies. Well, Malcolm Flaunders is the director of one of the UK's leading funeral planners, Golden Charter, and he joins us now. Malcolm, good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. Can you break down what these new rules mean for ordinary people? And is that average price likely to go down or up as a result of these changes?
Right. Afternoon, Liam. Excuse me. Well, firstly, the Financial Conduct Authority has been regulating financial services firms for about the last sort of 10, 20 years, and they regulate about 50,000 in the UK. So about the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen some bad practice coming into the UK market, and they quite rightly decided it was time regulated. Now, in essence, there are 3 tenets to the regulation that we'll see in the market for funeral planning. One is that there'll be far more stringent checks on the funeral plan providers themselves. That means even as basics as their IT, their processes, the way they look after customers, that needs to be a far higher standard. Secondly, they'll be introducing stringent checks on the trusts where the money is held for those funeral plans. And if you don't meet the hurdles that they set, you won't become regulated. And thirdly, and perhaps one of the most important tenets, is they will be effectively auditing the key decision makers of each provider company to make sure they are fit and proper and accountable for the business they are running. So all these changes are being introduced from the 29th of July, and all providers need to meet those 3 checks. And if they don't, then they will not become regulated and they will need to cease to trade. Now, as to your secondary point, in terms of the cost of the average funeral and funeral plan, no, the regulation will not directly affect the impact of the cost of a funeral. At the moment, it's the funeral plan providers that need to accommodate the cost of that regulation and getting themselves fit and ready so that we pass that regulation test for the 29th of July.
Now, Golden Charter's a leading funeral planner. That's why we invited you on the show. Do you think that these changes are necessary? And do you think your competitors think they're necessary as well?
Yes, we do, Liam. We welcome the regulation. Look, we are one of the biggest providers. And in fact, the vast majority of those who have bought a funeral plan are looked after by the top 3, of which we are one. However, there have been examples of bad practice. Part of the regulation will make sure that the paying of commission will cease. They'll also make sure that cold calling, the aggressive cold calling of vulnerable people, will cease as well. So we're as interested in ridding the market of this poor practice as well. All of us have been getting ready for regulation. In fact, we've been getting ready for the last 2 to 3 years. So when it comes on the 29th of July, we're pretty much there. But absolutely, we want to make sure that customers who consider buying a plan, and indeed those existing customers, are reassured, they're comfortable, their money is safe, and they know who will carry out their funeral in the future.
In the end, though, what keeps us all honest is competition, as I'm sure you'd agree. We want regulation, we need regulation, not least providing a service so exquisitely sensitive as a funeral plan. On the other hand, if regulation's too heavy and you knock out too many providers, you can be left with too few providers, which leads to a customer abuse of its own, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, that's a good point, Liam. I think we will see some current funeral plan providers, the smaller ones that may struggle to meet the regulatory standards. I think we may lose some of those from the market. Equally, all of the larger players who are well prepared, already looking after the vast majority of those funeral plan customers today, will meet those regulatory hurdles and will become regulated on the 29th of July. With that comes additional reassurance for customers, additional protections. The customer experience will improve. But I think it'll also encourage perhaps some other new entrants to the market in terms of innovation. Even our market is changing all the time in terms of customer preferences and the impact of digital. So I think post-regulation, you will see some new entrants come into the market with perhaps some different types of proposition. At the end of the day, it's entirely the customer's choice whether they choose to take out a funeral plan, but there will be greater choice as a result of regulation.
Well, let's hope so. We'll be keeping an eye, and it's good to talk to you, Malcolm Flaunders of Golden Charter, one of the UK's leading funeral providers. Now, it's a popular time of year to travel, of course, the start of the Easter holidays, not least when there are April showers. I personally got soaked on the way to work this morning. But for some British travellers, it's definitely not sunshine and seaside, because airlines are cancelling hundreds of flights and Eurotunnels warning of 3-hour delays for those trying to go in a vehicle to France. EasyJet and British Airways have put these flight cancellations down to staff absences as COVID infections keep rising, and Eurotunnel is blaming a broken down train for delays. Well, Bradley Harris is our northwest of England reporter. He's certainly not on holiday, he never sleeps. And he's joining us now from outside Manchester Airport. Brad, great to have you on the show as ever. Tell me about what's going on at the airport today in the wake of quite a lot of flight cancellations.
Yeah, I'm next to the runway at Manchester Airport, and it's just another day of frustration for hundreds of thousands of passengers who were looking forward to getting away for the Easter school holidays this year. Of course, this is the first time that people will have been able to go away for the Easter holidays since the restrictions for international travel were dropped. Right now, there are still flights operational at Manchester Airport. That's a Ryanair flight that's just landing behind me. I have seen EasyJet flights landing and taking off from Manchester Airport. That's despite cancellations, because at the moment, EasyJet have cancelled 62 flights that were scheduled for today. Plus, if you remember, a further 222 that were cancelled over the weekend. Then take a look at British Airways, a similar picture. 115 flights that were scheduled for today cancelled, and they were due to depart from Heathrow Airport, those British Airways flights. We've also seen at the airports really long queues going into security. Manchester Airport, there's been videos of queues backed up all the way to the car park outside the terminal buildings. If we look at Manchester Airport, they have responded to this and apologised and admitted that passengers' experience fell below the standard we aim to provide. That's what they said. With EasyJet, they've said that as a result of the current high rates of COVID infections across Europe, like all businesses, EasyJet is experiencing higher than usual levels of employee sickness. British Airways, similar statement, saying that they are experiencing the same issues rebuilding their operations while managing to continue the impact of COVID. And that's the problem. There are still people off sick at the moment with COVID. It means that there's hardly any staff on airlines and in airports, causing huge delays for hundreds of thousands of passengers at the moment.
Bradley Harris there, our GB News Northwest reporter at Manchester Airport. He makes a good point. Of course, this is the first Easter since the pandemic when people can actually get away. And yet again, our travel industry is whacked, this time by staff shortages. That is a story that we will return to here on The Money. But it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. We all know living standards are falling. They're falling at their fastest rate since the mid-50s, says the government's own Office of Budget Responsibility. And this cost of living mega squeeze is leading to widespread financial anxieties. Now, WageStream is a financial wellbeing app offered through employers such as Bupa, Halfords, Green King and the NHS. And the app is designed to provide a range of personal finance tools to support cash-strapped households and workers. WageStream says it helps people choose how often they get paid. It can track hours worked and earnings each day. It can facilitate chats with personal money advisors and help users get fairer deals on products like insurance and broadband, as well as building up rainy day savings pots, if indeed many of us can at the moment afford to save. Well, here to tell us more, it's WageStream's founder and CEO. In the studio with me here, Peter Briffett. He's my latest guest on Money Talks. Peter, great to have you in the studio. This is a difficult time for many, many people. If you're struggling with your finances, how can mucking about on your mobile phone, if you can afford a mobile phone, help you manage your finances?
Well, I think we found that we've just completed the biggest sort of state of financial wellbeing survey with British workers, and it's clear there's a huge amount of stress out there. You know, 25% of the UK workforce is stressing about money every day. So if you have a product that's supported by your employer where you can track your earnings, get visibility of what you're earning, and if you do have something you need to take care of, an unplanned expense, or to try and handle the cost of living crisis, having access to your earnings is one way that you're able to alleviate some of that stress. And we know in the UK, you know, frontline workers traditionally aren't very well served by banks. They tend to pay more for the financial services that they're provided by banks. In fact, the poverty premium, as we term it, is £490 more. This was even pre-pandemic, that frontline workers will spend on either utility bills, if you use a meter, or financial services. They're charged more than sort of high net worth, a prepayment meter, or middle income earners. So I think the employer here has a duty of care in order to try and help their staff, you know, get through this financial crisis. And our app allows employers to, you know, give their staff some sort of financial reassurance around their earnings and also their ability to access their earnings.
So forgive me if I'm wrong. My understanding is you're not regulated as a bank. You're not a deposit-taking institution, as they say in the lingo, which it requires huge licensing and regulation. But you can, is this right, you can track people's bank accounts and give them a sense of where they are financially, money in, money out, as well as negotiating with their employers. They could be paid differently. They might be prepared to be paid monthly if they're paid weekly, or vice versa.
Yeah,
is that right?
Absolutely right. I mean, if you are a salaried, you know, earner, an office worker, a thought worker, it's much easier for you to budget if you get a set amount every month. If you're a frontline worker, which is the majority of the UK workforce that are on shifts, on volatile pay, having access to earnings information is a really important way of understanding your financial position and understanding what you're spending, understanding what you're earning, and put it all in one place gives people that visibility. We've also, you know, that the 55% of UK families do not have £200 in savings. So when we hit this sort of financial tsunami that's coming our way, and we're in the middle of now with all the cost of living crisis that's happening, how can you navigate that? Well, employers can definitely play a part here. In most cases, an employer is the most positive financial institution in someone's lives because they actually pay them what everyone else is trying to take from them. So we found that, you know, rather than relying on banks to provide fair financial services, the employer can play a big part here. Employers like Bupa, like Co-op now, has a 5% interest savings product for their staff. That helps them, you know, start to save money in a much better way.
5% on that money?
Absolutely.
Crikey, when the banks are offering half a percent, if you're lucky.
Exactly. So I think there's, you know, what we have in WageStream, and there's others trying to do this as well, is provide financial wellbeing solutions through the employer who have a duty of care to their staff, who don't want to monetize anything from their staff and use the power of the enterprise to potentially get better rates on broadband, on insurance, and all these types of things.
So how do you make money? Does the employer pay you? Does the employee pay you? Or do you just make money from selling stuff on the side?
In most cases,
using people's financial data, with all respect, to target products at them, like insurance, like broadband?
We'll never sell anyone's financial data. We are contracted with the business. So we have, there's obviously a lot of security around data privacy around that. In most cases, the employer is paying for these financial services. In some cases, the employee will pay a sort of ATM charge in order to access their earnings. But ultimately, it's down to the employer to provide these types of services for their staff. And these are major benefits. Financial benefits are major benefits. Pay being the biggest one. What else can people do to pay to make it more flexible, more real for people, to try and help them with this financial crisis? Because the obvious answer is everyone should get paid more if the cost of living's going up. That's very hard for some companies to do en masse. So what else can they do to try and alleviate financial stress with their workforce, which is a really punishing stress? It affects everyone in different ways, but for lower income workers,
so much domestic violence, marital discord, abuse of kids, it's tied up with money, isn't it? Financial insecurity, and we're going to be hitting a lot of that. So you're rolling out this product. What do you think consumers might be concerned about when they're looking at this product, and how could you address those concerns? You just mentioned that in certain situations, employees may be charged by your firm.
Yeah, in order to take some of their earnings, sometimes that's the case. But I don't think there's any issue with employees. Most people use WageStream, our product, to get visibility of earnings. So for the first time for a shift where you can see in real time how much you're earning, and that allows you to make better decisions around what you need to spend money on and what you don't need to spend money on. And that's what technology now and fintech technology can do, is access these big workforce management systems that are held at a corporate and give people that access to that information. And that in itself alleviates stress. The worst thing someone can do is hide bills under a carpet, not deal with some of the financial issues. So giving people visibility is the biggest thing.
And your company did conduct a pretty chunky piece of research. 1 in 5 people don't feel in control of their financial future. 2/3 want their employer to support them more. 4 in 10 UK employees, their biggest worry is money. I mean, that was a pretty worrying picture, and surely it's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's going to get worse and worse in the next sort of 10 to 12 months. And I think Martin Lewis famously said that what else can they do? What else can you do? Well, I think the employer can help. And I think employers of Britain should look at these, especially large employers with large workforces. How can they help alleviate some of this financial stress? Because that's what they are the most positive financial institution in many people's lives. What else can they do to help?
Well, Peter Priffett, great to have you on the show. You are the CEO and founder of WageStream. We'll keep an eye on the company as this cost of living squeeze gets tighter. Just before we finish, let's bring in some of your views. I really appreciate you emailing me, tweeting GBNews, tweeting at Liam Halligan. Earlier, we discussed the rise in the price of milk that's coming down the track. Gillian said, I purchased a pint of milk this morning, which was 69p, an increase from 60p I paid a fortnight ago, which was an increase on the 50p it was before Christmas. I'd love to know if more money is going to the farmers, as it should be, or are supermarkets trying to cut their losses? Exactly my point, Gillian. Peter says supermarkets don't make much profit on milk. What about the middleman between farmers and supermarkets? It's a murky area, and On the Money will investigate. I can guarantee that. Alan got in contact to say reinstate a national milk board to represent all dairy farmers to set a minimum price for the milk at the farm gate. That's a popular idea. And John says, what a great programme, summing up the vital mix between energy and food security. Thanks, John. Let's hope that those in government are listening for all our sakes. Well, thanks everybody for your opinions and views today. It's great to be back here on The Money with you. That's all we've got time for. But thanks for joining me. Back tomorrow at 1 p.m, continuing the focus on the cost of living crisis and helping you to beat the squeeze. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather from the Met Office. Different feel out there today. It's not as cold as it was, but it is quite a grey day with many of us seeing outbreaks of rain. Here's the reason why. Low pressure up to the northeast with these two weather fronts. In between them, some mild air, but still a lot of isobars across the chart. So it is still a fairly breezy day, and there's an awful lot of cloud around as well, bringing rain at times. Certainly a wet day for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland. The rain a bit patchier elsewhere, and we do have some breaks in the cloud, a bit of sunshine over southeast Scotland, northeast England, and brightening up at times across parts of southern England and South Wales. And if we see a hint of sunshine, temperatures could easily pop up to 14, 15 degrees. So it is quite a bit warmer than it was for much of last week. During this evening, that rain will continue for Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland. Again, patchy rain elsewhere, particularly over hills. But again, largely dry across eastern England. Not much rain across the south either. All the cloud keeping the temperatures up. It is going to be a mild night with temperatures well above freezing. 8, 9, 10 degrees the low across the southeast. But cold air isn't far away from the northeast of Scotland, getting colder across Shetland and the mainland. And with the wet weather here, we're going to start to see more snow falling, initially over hills on Tuesday, but coming down to low levels by the end of the day across the far northeast. So that could cause some disruption, quite a bit of snow by the time we get to Wednesday. Wet weather working into Northern Ireland. It'll be rain here, as it will be through the central belt of Scotland. Much of England and Wales, dry and fine tomorrow. We'll see some sunny spells across the south, which could see highs of 16 Celsius. So quite a contrast between north and south during Tuesday, and that will continue as the snow, if anything, gets heavier on Tuesday night across northern Scotland. So there's something, as I say, we need to watch, could cause some disruption. We're going to see showery rain crossing the country during Wednesday. It turns brighter and drier to the end of the week, but colder for all of us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters.